Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Creating Tailwinds Podcast by Flight Path Financial with your hosts, John Urbick and Jared Adams. Join us today as we discuss the power of infinite banking. And here we go.
Hello, John. Greetings. How are you today, sir?
Hey, Jared. Wonderful day. Good to hear from you.
Great to hear from you. Hope you're doing well. All these, last couple of times we've talked and it's been this beautiful sunshine. Now we're talking about all the showers that have been going on over the last couple. Just wait around long enough. The weather will change, right?
Oh, I know. And the grass is going to grow like crazy now. That means I'll have to cut this acre and a half. No fun. That's
going to be some work. There's no question. What else has been going on? We won't talk about the 3.5%, 5%, and 4% drops over the. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about the market. We talk about how great it is to have a product that never loses value.
Oh, this is called. I'm calling this a tariff in a teapot. That's what I call this.
Tariff in a teapot. I like that.
Yeah, I mean it's ridiculous. This. If you look at I had a couple of buddies of mine who contacted me recently on the markets, and we aren't talking about markets here, but my gosh, look at the S&P 500, Dow, NASDAQ, all of them, and you look at the 10 years on those things, they're parabolic. They are way overdue for a correction. This is nothing new. We are going to see pullbacks, and maybe the tariffs may have precipitated it early, but they were coming. But sure. The good news is they're going to go back up again, 100% confident, and hopefully with things well played, we're going to be doing very, very well a year and 2 years down the road from now. I really believe in that. I do.
That's right.
So
I know everybody has their own, personal scenarios and circumstances. We try to respect that and be aware of that. But if you're in a spot now that you can capitalize, the market's at a discount.
Yep, you bet it is. And you couldn't be in a better place than being inside of an IBC contract to take advantage. We've talked about this. My gosh, sure. Those opportunities come, and they're going to happen today. They're going to happen tomorrow. They're going to happen next week. And those that are prepared with capital can step into this. And when everybody else is crying and running for the hills, we're going to be like, bring it on. I love it.
That's right. That's right. Great feeling to have. A little bit of a feeling of freedom, of power. How cool to know that you've capitalized your finances to move them into the spot that you can take control of that.
You bet. You bet.
Moving on with the book, this will be our last podcast as we've moved through the book. The book obviously is Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. We've taken some time to pick apart these different areas of the book that we really like, that we want to highlight. And now here we are kind of closing it up in the last two chapters of the book. The two topics are a different look at the monetary value of a college degree, and then what if I'm uninsurable? Right. We start off here with the college degree topic. John, what are your thoughts? What brings it to mind when you talk about that?
Well, I'm a big fan. We put 5 kids through college, and we've done everything from public school to private school to charter school to homeschool, and we've done every angle that you could think of. We have, my wife and I have done, and for us it all comes back to a great reminder from Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is begin with the end in mind. Sure. It's not, education is not a thing. It's a process of learning. It's where you learn to think. That a truly educated man or woman is one who can think and solve problems, not somebody who can just check a box. I don't care how many degrees or how many letters you have after your name. Tell me how well you can solve a problem, how well you can think out of a difficult situation. That's really meaningful. There was an interesting piece by IBM chief, I think this is in the book too, actually, IBM chief Louis Gerstner Jr. He said, we can teach people how to read balance sheets. We can do that. What's killing us is having to teach them to read and compute and to communicate and to think. I mean, think about that. Is that not so true in today's environment? Everybody knows how to text on a phone, but can they read a book? Can they sit there and could they write a book? Could they take a difficult problem, maybe problems that are coming from dissimilar sources, and kind of combine those different pathways and come up with a better solution by thinking through it than just to give a rote response maybe something that was taught in college. I've endured so many college professors that taught me nothing other than I don't want to do it the way they showed me to do it.
Sure, sure. Or even, how you're adding the human element, right? So like as we look into this maybe decade or two or three in front of us, what
Yeah.
job are you doing? Like you just said, reading the balance sheet. And yet, what job could AI complete that? Can they do the same thing that you're doing? Well, are you adding the human element of actually interpreting that data or actually having the personality required to then deliver that data? What does that piece look like that we're really struggling with? And, again, that kind of goes down a different rabbit hole, but the idea of, where does that human element link into what education may look like?
Well, I think education has to begin with understanding what it is you're trying to accomplish, right?
Sure.
What,
Yep.
what are we doing all this for? And if you translate that into the monetary side, you look at a public education. It's about today's dollars. It's going to range public to private universities anywhere from 108 to something like a couple $100,000. I think it was 100 and what did I read last? 150, I think it was. But anyway, if
Sure.
you look at
Yep.
paying that off in 10 years, a student loan debt at 7%, I ran the numbers. Public university, it's 135 grand. For a private university, it's 351,000. That's if at 7% on that money over a 10-year period paid off. That's a lot of dough. I mean,
It's a lot of
with
dough.
that,
And
you
that's
could,
not to mention that it's dough that you are not eligible to break free from in the event of a bankruptcy or some sort of Chapter 7 or Chapter 11.
yeah, but it be even besides that, just if you're just think about this, if you're just making minimum wage out there,
Yep.
and that's 700 $7.25 an hour, I think is what the federal is right now, if I'm not mistaken. You look at the 40-hour week, 290 yearly, about 15,000 bucks over a 10-year period. It's $150,000. You take that same person with no college education, saving that money and driving those same dollars into a $75,000 house with 20% down. That's 60 grand that they're going to leverage into this deal. But if they roll that money, this is to a fully paid off house, they can have that darn thing paid off in about 8 years by putting the differential that they're saving into this thing.
Mm.
I could show you this. I was working on it earlier, and then they could buy another house. So I think it was a 12 or 13-year point. They own two houses. They own two houses,
Wow.
and without any inflation, they're getting about $1,500. This is based on 1% of the fair market value of the house. If there's no appreciation of the house over those 10 years, there will be, but say there isn't, that person will be collecting about $1,500 a month without a college education. So
So
that's
as a form of a readback to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, in the case of that college education that would have cost you $135,000, when
yep,
you relate that to the interest cost and then how you've paid that back, the amount of money you had to pay out of pocket to pay that back, you're saying that you could have had two paid for homes instead of the education. So I guess, the trade-off there is, did you
yeah,
earn enough education to
yeah.
achieve the value over the lifetime of what it costs to not have two homes?
That's exactly right. And I am not saying at all that it's not worth going out and getting a college degree or,
Sure.
a postgraduate degree. Not at all.
But you got to know the end goal.
Yeah, but where are you going with this thing? Hey, I want to go into medicine. I want to go into law. I want to be an engineer. I want to build my own plumbing company. Nothing wrong with that. Those people in the trades are making a fortune. They don't need to go to college. They need to learn a trade. They need to become, they need to learn to learn to apply those skills under a skilled supervisor, their mentor in whatever field they choose, for sure. But the only
Sure.
point I'm trying to make is it's not a one size fits all. You go back to the FAFSA thing. Gosh, how many times this nightmare I had to fill out for my kids? This is
Sure.
this government form. You fill it out, and it's basically you're going to calculate what they're going to calculate what your expected family contribution is. 20% right off the top from the kids' income has got to go toward their education, right? But
Sure.
if you've got UGMA accounts, unified gift to minors accounts, if they've got stocks, bonds, cash gifts, equity in real estate that's not your primary residence, those all count toward that calculation of FAFSA. So
Yep.
they're going to pick winners and losers. The big one that we've talked about before was the 529 plan by the
Sure.
student or the
That all counts in
parents.
that same number.
You bet it does.
Sure.
And so here, and what are you going to do with this 529 plan? You can't really touch it except for educational expenses. And then, as we've talked about before, what if you're not going to use it for educational expenses? What can you do with it, Jared?
I mean, if you're not going to use it for
Roll it into
educational
something else,
expenses,
right?
yeah, you've got to use it. Again, we're talking just the 529 plan, right? If you're not going to
Right.
use
Yeah.
it for
Just
that kid that it was saved for, maybe you've got another kid behind them. You could use it within the family. But if it's the last child or the only child in the home and it's not used towards education, they only recently created a little carve out that allows you to convert it into a Roth IRA, but you can only do a portion of it.
yep.
And that account has to have been active. You have to have been actively saving in that 529 plan for 15 years before it's eligible to move it
Exactly
over to a
right.
Roth.
It's such a farce. They said they fixed it. Another problem that they created that they fixed. But what about if you've even if you've had it for 15 years? What if you put in the lion's share of that money over the past 5 years? Is that usable? Can you
No,
convert that?
no, you can
No.
only convert what's been saved over the course of 15 years.
Right, but even if you've had it in place for 15 years, how do they treat the monies that you saved over the past 5 years of that 15 years?
I don't know if I know that answer.
The answer is you can't transfer it.
Oh,
That's
it's
the answer.
ineligible. Yep,
It's ineligible for transfer. What a pile of manure that is.
that was
So,
right under the limited lifetime of 35,000. So maybe you saved 100 grand for college education and you used 10 of it. And you got a $90,000 lump sum there in a 521 account, or sorry, a 529 account, of which you can only transfer over 35,000, and then it has to have been not saved within the last 5 years.
yeah, it's crazy. And so
Yeah,
then you
all
say,
these
okay,
rules.
what am I going to do with this? All right, so heck with it. I'm just going to take the money anyway. What's going to happen? You're going to pay ordinary income tax and a 10% penalty for non-education expenses. What a pile of manure. This is the problem with government programs. They create these monsters with all these rules that nobody knows what they are. They either find out after the fact or they find out that the money isn't there for them to use in the first place as they intended. It's
Sure.
not right. It's your money. You saved it. You should not have to put up with that kind of garbage. But now
Well,
let's flip
just
this on
like you
its
were
head, Jared.
Yeah,
Go
I was
ahead.
going to say, just like you were saying with all of this saving vehicles where the government created the problem and then so they created the solution and it gets all complex and rolled into one ball. What happens if you choose the IBC path?
That's exactly the correct
So let's
pathway.
say let's say over the course of 20 years we rolled into a it's obviously got a death benefit portion, but then we've already talked about how the cash value is the equity on the death benefit. So let's say you've got $100,000 sitting there in a cash value on this account. What can you do with that? There's only limits, right? You can only spend it on education.
Within an IBC contract?
Yep.
No, there are no
No. Okay.
limits.
So
You
no
can use
limits
it for
there.
anything. You want to
I'm
go buy
asking loaded.
$100,000 worth of toilet paper, you can do it, and then
I'm
sell it when
asking
everybody
loaded
else
questions.
panics.
I know you play nice with my fun loaded questions. So it's not carved out just towards education. Is there a
No,
certain age at which you have to turn over the funds to the child?
nope.
Nope. Okay, got that. And then if you didn't use it for education, could you use it for their first home?
You could
Sure could. Yeah.
anything your heart desires. And how
What about I was going to say, what about the FAFSA? You said that you have to report, whether you've got, real estate or if they have some sort of stocks or bonds or otherwise. Do you have to report the cash value in the IBC account to the FAFSA amount?
you could have $1 million sitting in a cash value in your life insurance account, and the reportable amount is exactly zero. Not
Huh.
reportable. Not reportable.
I know I'm asking the loaded questions. I don't mean to play dumb, but I definitely agree with you in the exact that these are pretty amazing constructs to allow you all of the control, all of the gains, with zero of the restrictions, with zero of the liabilities on which way it's allowed to go and in which way it can go. You're in control. You're in the driver's seat.
Yep, you absolutely are. It is there. I don't know anything that it has more flexibility and more opportunities built in to an instrument than a cash value life insurance contract. It is truly phenomenal, and the people that understand this are taking full advantage of it.
Sure. Not to mention the
Yep.
fact that if you do save in a 529 plan and then you've got some left over, maybe you had been sitting on it for or saving over the course of 15 years. Now you're going to roll it over. So the child is 21. They can't touch that Roth IRA until 59 and a half without penalty. So you've just
Nope.
locked it up for 38 years of which you can't touch it. It's going to grow, but you can't touch it. You can't do anything with it. That's totally contrary to what an IBC account does, where if you don't use a part of it, put it to place elsewhere.
Yeah, let's say you've got your son or daughter with those same funds has a friend who's industrious, and they said, "Look, let's go start this business. I'm going to put in 15 grand. If you can meet me with another 15 grand, we can get this thing off the ground. And this is going to be wonderful. This is I mean, I don't have 15 grand. I have it in my 529 plan. I have it in a Roth IRA, but I can't get to that money.
Sure.
What a shame. What a shame.
What a shame. Not in an IBC account.
Nope, not in an
That's
IBC
right.
account. Complete flexibility, complete freedom. And that's what this is about. It's about financial freedom, not about the government mandating and directing you what you can and can't do with your money.
That's right.
So,
Yep, pretty amazing in terms of how that all sets up, and I love that that gets brought up in the book, and at least given some time on how the different ways are that you can put these accounts to use. You know that when we say infinite banking concepts, we really do mean infinite in the amount of different ways that you can put your capital to work, and that's really the limiting factor of all of this is your imagination.
your imagination. That's exactly what Nelson would tell you. It's an exercise in imagination, and you can do it, and you can make those imaginings a reality. But you have to have the foundation to do it, and you have to
Yep,
build that foundation, and you can do that so effectively with
that's right.
an infinite banking contract.
That's right. Well,
Yeah.
I don't want to just gloss over a couple of pages of illustrations, but Nelson does go over some illustrations on the education side on how you can save and what that looks like. Kind of generally speaking, as we've gone through this book, we've kind of pushed the illustrations to side just a little bit. I know Nelson singles out a lot of various factors in the book, really to illustrate the different facets of whole life. So as we just kind of pass over these couple of pages, I just want to say that they are good, resources as you go through the book, and especially if you read it multiple times, you can really go back and use these pages as a resource. But that being said, we're just going to kind of gloss over those in the education section here. Is that okay with you, John?
Yeah, you really people need to read the book and to give this context. It's very difficult to read an illustration on a podcast, Jared.
That's right.
You're going to gloss people's eyes off. This is very, very challenging to just read through a bunch of numbers. Suffice to say that the numbers grow with uninterrupted compounding interest every year, and you can see it. And when you look at one of these illustrations, you begin to see the flow of funds falling into your lap, not into somebody else's. And it's a
That's right.
beautiful thing, and it works. But
Yep.
yeah, no, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about illustrations. Everyone who is interested in the infinite banking concept really needs to do themselves the good service of taking the time to read the book. 92 pages. It's an easy read. And if you have any questions, either Jared or myself would be more than happy to field them.
That's right.
So,
And you'll find that we're not going to lead with an illustration. We're going to want to know if you know the concepts and have read the book first, as
it'll
just the
save you
lead in.
so much time if you read the book because
Yes,
you're going to answer 90% of your questions just by reading the book and then filling it in for you personally and customizing it to your specific situation.
that's
That's
right.
where a practitioner comes in. They can
That's
help
right.
you say, okay, you understand the concept. Now let's apply it to you. Let's talk the nuts and bolts of this thing for you.
That's right. Well, with that said, there's one last chapter in the book. It starts on page 82, and it's called "What If I Am Uninsurable?" So, to lead us into that, John, I would say that if you are uninsurable, if you personally are uninsurable, that doesn't mean that you don't qualify for IBC. You do still qualify for an IBC setup for your family. But what it does mean is that you have to find another insurable life within your household that qualifies, and then that's what you attach one of these infinite banking contract policies to. Is that a good way to say that? Would you agree with that?
Yes, but it goes beyond your household. An insurable interest merely means exactly what you're saying. You could have a business partner. You couldn't even. It doesn't have to be a relation.
That's a
but
good point.
you're in business with somebody, or
Yep.
maybe there's a liability between between two people, and with that liability becomes a insurable interest, or maybe there's an agreement you have where you've agreed to cover a cost, or someone else has agreed to cover a cost, and then in the eventuality that person can't do it, then the life insurance contract would come into play. So there's a lot of different ways to doing insurable interest. Maybe a grandparent intends on paying for a grandchild's education, and they're going to pay it. Well, what if they pass? Well, they can buy a life insurance contract on the
Yep.
grandchild because there is an insurable interest there. There's a
That's right.
lot of different ways of doing it. Other ways, let's say you and I are in business together, Jared, and we have a situation where, okay, you and I get along great. We have a great business model working together, but you're
Yep.
like, oh, I don't know if I want to go into business with Anton if something happens to John, or I say, oh, I don't want to go into business with, actually, Jared's wife, because, they don't
Yep.
understand the business like you and I
Sure.
do. You want to have absolute control of that. And so one of the ways to preclude a difficult situation from happening is by building in a buy-sell agreement, for instance. Not quite
Sure.
IBC, but
Yep.
it's the same type of thing. So
And it's
yeah, a
protecting
lot of
the owner's side of the assets in the event that something was
exactly
to
right.
happen, so that the owner who remains after someone had passed is basically covered on the asset, so that they don't have to go into business with the other person's spouse.
Right, and the other person's spouse benefits because they're getting bought out essentially through the life
Sure.
insurance contract.
Yep.
So everybody wins in that circumstance, except the person who passes, of course, they don't really win. Well, maybe they win if they depends where they're going, right?
That's right.
Hopefully, it's a good thing.
That's right.
But so life insurance is so flexible and so powerful if constructed correctly. And that is
Sure.
what we're talking about. We're talking about what if I'm uninsurable? I just had, Jared, my knee. I wound up having this crazy meniscus thing. I had two tears, one in the lateral and then one right at the root tear, which
Yep.
nobody fixes anymore. I had to go up to Minnesota to have this done. It took me out from flying for what's probably going to be 9 months. I did not expect that. Climbing the
Sure.
walls, not flying airplanes, but
Yep.
that's what's going on with me. You know,
Yep.
everybody
I
else
know.
has their own
I feel the
stories,
same
right?
way. Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm technically out on disability from the airline that I work for right now, because of a found heart issue, and that found heart issue popped up kind of out of nowhere. It had just so happened to be right as we were setting up one of these IBC policies for our family, and then after going through some of the testing, found out I am completely uninsurable. Well, that didn't stop us from running IBC for our family. We're rolling on almost 2.5, 3 years now of dedicated premium payments that allows us to run our own bank and control our capital, build our warehouse of wealth through these policies. That even as an uninsured person, I'm still able to control everything that happens under how all these things work. So I know we've mentioned this in previous podcasts. There's the life that is protected, the payer or owner of the contract, and then the beneficiary. It takes three parties for each one of these contracts. And it's important to know that as the owner slash payer, that you're the one that's in control of everything about that contract, even though it may not be
Right.
your life that is underwritten, and you may not be the direct beneficiary, but you are in control of all of the happenings, or how the finances get run, or where everything goes. You're in control of all of that.
Exactly right. And what if you just for the sake of argument,
Sure.
Jared, what if you wanted to transfer that ownership to your wife? Could you do that?
I sure could. I know it's
Yeah,
one
you
simple
can.
form through the life insurance company. I call them up and tell them I want to do that. They send me the form. I fill out a couple of details and mail it back in. And then within a week or two, my wife now owns the contract and I am no longer the owner.
Well, how about the beneficiary? Can you change your beneficiary?
Yep. Yep. Pretty easy. Same process.
What's the only thing you can't change?
Can't change the protected life. These are a
That's
whole
it.
life contract that is underwritten for that person for their entire life. Can't change that.
Talk about the absolute epitome of flexibility.
Yep.
This is great stuff. This is great
Yep.
stuff.
Completely agree.
Oh my gosh. But all right. Well, I think in the interest of covering the book. I think we've done a pretty good job of covering at a high level, a 30,000-foot view, as they say.
Yep.
And Jared, if without objection, I think we can kind of close up this chapter of covering the end of the book. There's a lot we didn't cover, ladies and gentlemen. It's just there's
I
just
agree.
too much in there. However, Jared and I are committing to covering a lot of other wonderful topics as they apply to infinite banking that we're going to share on future podcasts. And if you have any questions about specific things you want covered, please let us know, and we'd be more than happy to talk with you. We'd be more than happy to even have them on a future podcast. What do you
That's
think,
right.
Jared?
I completely agree. I was thinking about it today, how ironic it was that we covered the book in 10 podcasts, because the course, like literally the book, Becoming Your Own Banker, is a handbook for a 10-hour course. So when Nelson was alive and with us, he ran a 10-hour course, and this was the handbook for that course. So
Right.
obviously we didn't cover it via 10 hours of podcasting. And although it's been a lot of fun, I think it's unique that we did cover it in 10 sessions. That was not planned, by the way. There was a little bit of luck there.
It's a good number.
One of the key things at the very end, and he talks about the points to consider, I'll leave you with for our ending here today, John. It says, you finance everything you buy. You either pay interest to someone else or you give up the interest you could have earned elsewhere. There are no exceptions. And that one is very personal in terms of how I've become along the IBC journey. And until I understood that, I never truly got this. And even though I had read the book a time or two, it took me multiple readings before that really sunk in. So don't be afraid to pick up the book, read it a time or two or six. Every single time I read it, I get a little nugget.
Well said, Jared. I myself have read this book. I couldn't begin to tell you how many times.
All right.
Even
That's
and
right.
you can even read it in sections. There could be a section of it that applies to your circumstance, and you might read that section. It's almost like a reference manual on top of being a book on banking. So
That's
it's
right.
quite helpful in that regard.
That's right. Yep. Well, fantastic. Well, we'll sign off for now, John. Thanks again. Look forward to meeting with you again next week.
Thank you, Jared. We'd like to thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Creating Tailwinds podcast with your hosts, John and Jared. As always, we welcome your questions and critiques. You can reach us through the Contact Us tab at flightpathfinancial.com. Remember, it's all about how you think. As Nelson Nash has said about infinite banking, give it your close attention, and it can make a radical improvement in your financial future.